Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Early Morning Core. I'm your host, Tristan, and today we're going to be covering Evil Dead Rise from 2023, which is one of my favorite Evil Dead movies. I absolutely love this one. It's very bloody and gory, and it's got likable characters. It's a good movie. This one, kind of, I've seen, I think, three times this week now, simply trying to, one, get ready for this episode, and also because it's a good movie. Me and my wife rewatched it before going and watching Evil Dead Burn, so let's go ahead and get into it. It's directed and written by Lee Cronin, had a budget of $15 million and ended up grossing over $146 million, which is pretty successful. But we start the movie off with the entity going through some woods over a lake and almost hitting a girl. But it's not the entity, it's actually a drone. And she gets onto the guy mm, that almost, quote, cut her head off. And he says it would just scramble her face real bad. And the girl asks if he's going to check on Jessica because she ain't feeling good. And he said he gave her some Klonopin so she can sleep off whatever the fuck is wrong with her. Girl is such a pain in the ass. So she closes her book and walks back to the cabin and goes in and calls out for Jessica before opening the privacy curtain. Seeing Jessica on the bed groaning, this girl sits down in the bedroom and opens up her book, which is Wuthering Heights, and tells Jessica she better wake up in the next half hour or she's going to be forced to go drown that worthless meat puppet. Jessica chuckles, and Jessica sits up and starts saying the words on the page of the book, even though she can't see the book, which is creepy as hell. And if your friend starts doing that, leave, okay? No if, but maybe get the fuck out of there. But just 'cause voice is distorting and her friend is asking her to shut up until she yelled Jessica, and then Jessica fell over onto the floor. And when I say she fell, like she gracefully folded into the floor. Like she did not fall hard at all. Uh, but then Jessica starts puking and she passes out, and then she wakes up and grabs this girl's hair and like rips part of her scalp off. It is pretty bad. But the girl kind of walked back to the guy still on the dock, and I think he's pissing, but Jessica's also walking over there, and she drops the girl's scalp before picking up the drone and then pulling the drone's blades onto her face, cutting her face, and then falling into the lake. So the guy also goes into the lake and he gets his head ripped off before Jessica starts to float, and she floats like an inch above the water. And we get the title card of Evil Dead Rise behind her. And then we see that one day earlier, we're at this bathroom covered in graffiti, like, for some concert or something. And this girl's taking a pregnancy test. And this guy knocks on the door and is asking for something unimportant for someone else, and she is pregnant. Congratulations. But cut to her in the rain grabbing a duffel bag outside an apartment. Then cut inside the apartment, and her sister Ellie is making a tattoo gun, and her daughter is asking about her favorite black t-shirt for a Labor Day protest. Her mom says she's not going to a protest, and her daughter said her friend's dad is taking them, and her mom kind of says if she remembered to take out the bathroom hamper, kind of like, yeah, no, you're not going, okay? and also uh tell Danny to turn down the music. And then we see Danny in his room with art everywhere and like a DJ set up. And then cut to the youngest daughter cutting the head off her doll with a pair of scissors. And then we hear Ellie say, Cassie, you better not have my scissors. And Cassie puts the scissors underneath the couch and says, No, I don't. And the doorbell gets rung, and the oldest daughter, her name's Bridget, answers, and there are two boys there eating Cheetos. And they ask Bridget to come over to watch all the Freddy movies in a row, in which one of the kids says, even the shitty ones. And the oldest one says, there aren't any shitty ones, which, valid. And Bridget says, in your dreams. She closes the door, and the older kid contemplates on knocking again before walking away. And Bridget turns around and sees Cassie is wearing a mop on her head and says, your boyfriends are weirdos. And Bridget says, you're the weirdo. And Cassie gets her in the gut with Stefani, or Stephanie. And I'll be honest, it looked like it kind of stung. But Cassie starts running, and Bridget catches up to her and starts wrestling her, and the broomstick, which, yeah, the broomstick breaks. And Bridget takes off running into the room with Danny dancing like a DJ. And Bridget says, big crowd tonight, Dan? And he stops and he kind of looks embarrassed. And Cassie is banging on the door when both Bridge and Dan grab her and throw her on the bed, tickling her, which I absolutely love this family, like dynamic and everything. Like I said, these are likable characters. But Ellie is washing her hair in the bathtub when the doorbell starts to ring. So Ellie answers the door and no one is there until her sister scares her and then gets karate chopped in the nose. But they hug and Ellie asks if she's sleeping, and her sister says that it beats looking like a tampon. And we learn that the building is being demolished in about a month. And because of Cassie, we learn that the building also used to be a bank. But Beth brought like a couple gifts, and she also brings out this beer mug for their dad. And the tone changes when she says that. So Ellie tells her kids to go get pizza with the car. We find out that apparently the dad believes paying child support is the same as co-parenting from afar. So Beth is apologizing because she did not notice Ellie call her or anything, which was months ago. And we learn from the kids because they get back with pizza that the gate to let them in is kind of slow. Like he's got to reach out with the clicker and he's got to click it a bunch of times and then before it actually does it. But cut back to the apartment and the sisters are in the bathroom together when this earthquake starts. And then cut back to the kids and they're in the parking garage and the earthquake starts. So they drop the drinks and the pizza and they get beside the support beam and this crack opened up into the old bank. So Danny, instead of, thinking, hey, there's an earthquake going on, let me get underneath a parking garage where I could sprain my ankle, I could get trapped, I could get buried alive. Let me let me just go in here. I mean, it's fucking stupid. Take out the supernatural aspects of it. It's stupid. But we see that this is the old bank vault that he's now inside. He starts looking around and he sees some old boxes and he sees like letters and a picture of three priests and he hears a creaking and he turns around and we get jump scared by Jesus on a giant cross, which almost hits him. Uh, but then Danny sees a stone coffin with many crosses and rosaries like hanging over it. So he does the smart thing and he grabs whatever's inside of it, pulls it out, unwraps it, and we see a book covered in insects, and all the insects start flying around. Then cut back to Beth and Ellie, and they start looking for the kids in the hallway, and they're like, "Oh my God, we gotta start looking for them. There's an earthquake going on." One of the neighbors says, "Let me go get my keys. I'll drive you around." Uh, but the kids come up the elevator, and Ellie gets onto them, saying, about using the elevator after an earthquake and everything. But they group hug, and Beth is watching, and we see Ellie is like getting some clothes together, and Danny is talking about how the book could be sold, and Mom can use the money. But Bridget argues that she wouldn't want the money from something that is stolen. And not only that, but this book has teeth, keeping it closed, which is very creepy. So Danny tries to open it up, and he pricks his finger on one of the teeth and bleeds on it, opening the book. And they look through some of the pages, and Bridget closes it and says that he needs to take it back. Of course, Danny says that Mom's not going to let us leave, but Cassie is wearing goggles for this bath that Beth made, and she's afraid of the water. So Beth sticks her hand like in the water, trying to show her that nothing's there before she gets grabbed, and she starts panicking. And then she pulls out a rubber ducky. But then Beth starts getting like stomach cramps, and Cassie says she hates when her tummy hurts too. I'm sorry. Cut back to Danny, who pulls out a record from the vault and starts to play it, and the voice is kind of distorted until he starts like spinning it around. And we hear that this is one of the three books of the dead, and how the book is made of flesh and blood. And then we also hear Bruce Campbell say it's called the Book of the Dead for a reason. And this priest is trying to get it approved to translate the book. He goes to the next record, and this guy was secretly translating it and learning its secrets. At the same time, Ellie is taking the elevator down. The priest starts speaking curse speech, and Danny tries to turn it off, but he can't. It gets louder, and the book's pages start flipping. And Ellie gets slammed by this entity in the elevator. She starts hearing snarling and growling, and then this thing rips out at Ellie's earring, and she tells it to shut the fuck up. Then the wires come down and they start to hang her. More start to wrap up her arms and her legs. They break one of our arms. I think that's all that we see. But the lights flicker and then go out, causing like the entire apartment to go through a power outage. But Danny closes the book, and Bridget tells Beth and Cassie that it looks like it's just us that's out. They go to check on Ellie, but she's not in bed, and the front door opens, While Bridge is working on candles and Danny is messing with the breakers, Ellie goes into the kitchen. She starts up the gas stove and starts throwing eggs into this cast iron. And the eggs are bloody and it's disgusting looking. And she starts talking about a dream she had in the tall forest and how she wishes she could cut them all open and stay inside their skins. Ellie comes back and says it's not her before dropping and crawling towards them and pukes a lot of white stuff. And she asks Beth, "Don't let it take my babies." So Beth and Danny start dragging her to the elevator, which is shady as fuck looking, because it keeps opening and shutting, and all the wires and everything. So they go to the stairs, but the stairs are gone. Beth starts talking about how quickly she was changing while her neighbor tried to close Ellie's eyes. Beth was talking about how she'd go from normal to crazy to normal again to passed out to dead because they believe that she is dead right now. But this neighbor tries to close Ellie's eyes and they open back up. This happens twice. This guy then asks to pray, and this other neighbor is there. He's a bit older, and Beth join hands with him, and they say that they can get to the fire escape, but have to go through apartment 82, which is unoccupied. And this older guy has tools, but they're in his truck, and the doors are reinforced too. Cassie is crying in Bridget's arms, saying she wants her dad. Cut to the neighbors trying to bust in, and the older guy suggests blowing the door open with his shotgun, which the younger guy says people are already panicked enough without guns going off. Cut to Beth talking to Ellie about how she's scared to even face her kids and how she doesn't know what to do. Beth is saying how she can't believe she won't hear her speak again. And she hears Ellie on her phone saying she's burning alive, and then her phone cracks and breaks, causing Beth to drop it, of course. But she looks at Ellie and a fly lands on her eyeball. And Ellie blinks and then looks at her, and then sits up. Beth checks her forehead and she's burning up. So they put her in the tub until Ellie kind of hops up and she's now on the ceiling and she starts screeching, which causes the water to boil before dropping into the water. And then she creeps her head out of the water. And when Danny asks for his mom, this Deadite says, "Mommy is with the maggots now." And she creeps out of the bathroom with a piece of broken mirror and starts limping towards them and attacks Beth, stabbing her in the hand. When Bridge yells at her to stop, and the Deadite drops the piece of broken mirror and tells Bridge that she's finally free from all you titty sucking parasites, before lunging at Bridge and grabbing the tattoo gun and using it on her own head, then tries to use it on Bridge, going for her eyeball until Bridge turns her cheek and gets her in the cheek instead. And Ellie doesn't try, she licks the wound. And Danny comes up behind and hits Ellie with the chair, knocking her into the hallway of the apartment. So Beth grabs Cassie and Danny grabs Bridge. And this Deadite says, "Who wants to rot next?" And it starts saying, "Eeny, meeny, miny, you." When the more religious neighbor actually comes in and says, "Ellie?" And the Deadite turns around and snarls and goes after him. They get into the hallway and she's on him and bites out his eye and spits it into one of the kid neighbor's mouth making him choke. Beth closes and locks the door. Ellie starts headbutting the door, and Beth is trying to get the door more secured. The other kid neighbor gets killed by getting thrown, and the religious neighbor gets up to the door asking for help, and he gets his throat ripped out. Until the older neighbor shoots Ellie with a shotgun, and then gets killed when he drops his guard. Beth goes to the window and tries to yell for help, and Bridge confronts Danny about how Mom looks like something from the book and says it's your fault. Beth splits them up when they start to push each other and says we don't turn on each other, and Danny takes Beth to look at the book. Bridge is holding something up to her wound and zoning out when Cassie asks if it hurts. Bridge gets up and walks away, saying she's fine, and Ellie starts singing, which gets Cassie's attention. Bridge is in the kitchen at the first aid, and Danny is showing the book and telling Beth about the records, and Bridge's wound gets way worse. She starts leaking black liquid out of her eyes, nose, and mouth. Cassie gets a chair to look out the door, and Ellie is sitting in the hallway with her back turned. And Ellie starts to tell Cassie that she was just sad about their dad being gone. But he's back now, trying to trick Cassie. We can be a big, happy family again. And then Mom says, "What's wrong?" Not Mom. Cassie says, "What's wrong with you?" And she says, "Nothing a big ol' hug and kiss from you won't fix. Open up now." And Cassie unlocks the deadbolt when Ellie reaches through and grabs Cassie. So, of course, naturally, Beth comes looking and they get the door closed. And Ellie says, "Open the door like you open your legs, you groupie slut." And Ellie calls her a psycho bitch. But Beth sends Danny and Cassie to their room, and Cassie is comforting Danny by saying Stephanie will protect them. And they hear a ruckus going on in the kitchen, and Bridge is crouched on the kitchen counter. She's eating a wine glass, saying, "I gotta kill the creepy crawlies I got inside my tummy." And we see some glass cut her throat from the inside. It looks disgusting. Looks wonderful though at the same time. And Beth slips and falls. When Bridge gets down, Beth kicks her like into the counter, and Bridge grabs a cheese grater and uses it on the back of Beth's leg. And Ellie is going nuts on the front door. Bridge bursts into the kids' room and charges at Cassie, and Cassie holds up Stephanie and skewers Bridge with it. Bridge pulls it out and then drops. And Cassie tells Beth she'll be a good mom someday because she knows how to lie to kids, since Cassie asks if they'll be alright. Danny did tie up Bridge just in case, and Beth says she wants to listen to it and see if there's something that can help stop all of this. No power, but Beth can fix up a battery. Beth hands Danny a knife to protect Cassie, and Beth starts to listen to the record with headphones. The record describes when they spoke the words and the demon possessed Cortez and how they got rid of it without prayer and by burning. Bridge starts twitching and Ellie gets in after she hears the cat in the vents. So now Ellie knows of a way to get in. Bridge starts floating towards Cassie and Danny. She pushes Cassie out of the way to stab Bridge. Danny pushes Cassie out of the way to stab Bridge, and after he does, Bridge carries him into the kitchen and pins his arm down with the same knife. At the same time, Beth is listening, and this priest says the only way is complete dismemberment. And we see Ellie coming in through the vent behind her. Bridge is hovering over Danny and puking all over him and stabs him again in the chest. and Danny gets a spray can of some sort and gets the flame going and lights Bridge on fire. Ellie holds her nail on the cord after shoving Beth out the way, and holds her nail on the record and uses her mouth like a speaker. Danny has a knife in his chest, and Beth sees, and Ellie grabs her from behind and pins her down and starts smelling her and says, "Two souls," and tells Beth that Ellie waits in hell for her and her bastard baby. Cassie slides the scissors to Beth, and Beth stabs Ellie in the face, like through her nose. And they start to go and stop when Cassie asks if she's gonna be a mom, which they're still in the apartment. Not the best time to be asking these questions. Let's go. But they go into the hallway and see all the dead bodies. And she tries to bust the door open until she sees the old man's shotgun and a couple shells. Ellie pulls out the scissors and goes into the hallway and floats towards Beth, and Beth blows off her leg. Then shoots her again when the old man grabs her and calls her a thief. Then Danny and Bridge come out and they start crying, like mourning Ellie. Then they start laughing, and Ellie says everyone is dead by dawn. And all the neighbors, which are dead, kind of wake up and then start saying, "Dead by dawn." And Beth and Cassie get in the elevator and close the door when it starts filling up with blood. And we see the pages of the book start flipping, and the demons, Ellie, Bridge, and Danny, they start to merge together. And we see a page about a demon called a Marauder. It is now on top of the elevator, and the elevator falls to the ground floor because of all the weight from the blood and the demon and Cassie and Beth. And when we see the blood come crashing out, and Beth grabs Cassie, waking her up and asking if she's dead. Then get in the car and back up when they click the beeper and are going to go when it turns green, but the tire gets stuck in a crack. And we see the Marauder crawl up to the driver's side and it sees that they aren't there. Beth and Cassie are trying to be sneaky on the other side of the car, and the Marauder is crawling around, and they run and make it under the gate until it grabs Cassie right before the door closes, and the Marauder has a chainsaw and starts bringing it to Cassie's head when Beth breaks in and shoots it from on top of a wood chipper. It turns on the wood chipper after Beth slips and falls off, but after Cassie turns it off, Beth grabs the chainsaw, tells Cassie to turn it back on. Then Beth starts going to work on the Marauder and gets Danny and Bridget into the wood chipper, and the only demon left right there is Ellie and asks for help. Bethy Boo, and Beth drives the chainsaw into the top of her head, then cuts her head off and kicks her head into the wood chipper. Beth starts comforting Cassie, and they start to leave when she grabs the chainsaw, and we see on the keychain there is a family picture. Cut to some random neighbor trying to leave to go to a cabin, and they see the blood everywhere, and how some pieces are still moving. And this demon gets her, which is actually the beginning of the movie. The end. Holy hell. Oh, I feel like I said a lot of details for this to only be 30 minutes. Okay, so now I feel like we can get into some Evil Dead Rise trivia, maybe, seeing as how much time we have. I was honestly expecting this episode to be a whole lot longer. Uh, but director Lee Cronin stated in an interview that 1,720 gallons of fake blood were used for the movie. The film was originally meant to be released exclusively through HBO Max via direct to streaming, but it performed so strongly during test screenings that the studio decided to release it theatrically instead. Smart move. The pizza place that they go to is called Henrietta's, a reference to Henrietta Noby, the demon in the basement in Evil Dead 2. Inside the cabin in the prologue of the film is a ticking clock on the wall. It's the exact same clock as the one Cheryl is drawing in Evil Dead 1981. It's kind of rare, but shot in chronological order. That's impressive. To get into Ellie's alternate personality, Alyssa Sutherland took inspiration from Jim Carrey's performance as Stanley Ipkiss in The Mask 1994. Honestly, I don't think I would have ever made that distinction. The film opens with the sound of a fly. This is the same sound used throughout different entries dating all the way back to The Evil Dead 1981, and has become a tradition to appear at least once. On the Extra Vision podcast, director Lee Cronin revealed that all the characters were named after actors that had previously appeared in the Evil Dead films. Huh. Brings the Evil Dead back to New Line Cinema, who distributed the original film's wide release non-festival screenings in 1983. If you look at Ellie's arms, they are wrapped in tattoos of vines. This is a nod to Cheryl from The Evil Dead, Bobby Joe from Evil Dead 2, and Mia from Evil Dead 2013, who all were attacked and bound by vines. This is the only Evil Dead film to not feature the 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88 Royale vehicle. On the show Extra Vision, director Lee Cronin shared that the name of the building the movie takes place in, the Monde, is an anagram of demon. Huh. The shooting was short and fast, and the team often worked weekends to get the job done. Senior prosthetic artist is pretty cool. Tristan Lucas told MPA it was a crazy schedule. Long days, long weeks, and lots of working on the weekend at the workshop to get stuff done. We try to accommodate as much as we can. There's not much we'll have say no to. Our head of department, prosthetics designer Luke Pulte, has always reinforced the idea it's our job to get what they want on the screen. As long as we're not killing ourselves or working for free, we should do what we can to get it done in a healthy way. Lucas praises some of the cutting edge technology available to help make their job easier. The advancement of 3D scanning and printing is a huge one. Now you can have someone in LA who needs a head scan done, and you can get it done there and emailed to you. You can print out their head and start working instead of having to get something physically shipped halfway across the world. It's a huge benefit. Those technologies are changing so fast. Adjusted for inflation, this is the most commercially successful film in the Evil Dead franchise. Mark Mitchinson, Mr. Fonda, also appeared in Ash vs. the Evil Dead as Crosby, the leader of a militia that Ash's crew crosses paths with, which that would be the older neighbor, I believe. Although there's no Oldsmobile Delta in the movie, the chainsaw in the movie is exactly the same color as the Oldsmobile Delta from Lee Cronin, referring to Sam Raimi's yellow car Easter egg that has appeared in all of the Evil Dead films to date, as well as many other of Raimi's films. Lily Sullivan based Beth's accent on that of Mila Djokovic, which I can hear that. Yeah. Mark Mitchinson, who plays Mr. Fonda, is also the voice of the priest Marcus Littleton in the Book of the Dead recordings in the movie. That's pretty cool. Cassie's friend Stephanie is an obtuse throwback to the dagger with a skull as its handle in The Evil Dead and The Evil Dead 2. It is used optimistically by our protagonist and is ineffective. Uh, uh, this is the last film to feature the 2021 variant of the opening Warner Bros. New Line Cinema logo, consisting of both the blue WB shield and silver New Line Cinema logo. It is also the last time both logos appear together before the split in New Line Cinema's revival. The second Evil Dead film that doesn't have Bruce Campbell as a main character, which, yeah, but I mean, we do hear his voice, so there is a cameo. The novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Bront is featured in the film's opening minutes. This is the second horror film within the year to reference a Bront sister novel, as Jane Eyre was briefly shown in Barbarian 2022. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bront is being read by Teresa in the prologue. Ironically, Warner Bros. Picture, this film's distributor, would release an adaptation of the novel Wuthering Heights by Emerald Fennell only 3 years later. Lead actresses Lily Sullivan and Alyssa Sutherland were born in September. Sullivan was born on the 8th in 1983, and Sutherland was born on the 23rd in 1982. That's pretty cool. The sound of Ellie biting out a man's eyeball in the hallway is audio recording of Bruce Campbell furiously biting into an apple. Campbell cameo in the first of the three records. Danny plays Bruce can be heard saying, "Destroy it. It's called the Book of the Dead for a reason." At the Beyond Fest premiere, director Lee Cronin suggested Campbell could be playing Ash again in the recording, as the series has had multiple instances of Ash going back in time and encountering the Necronomicon slash Necronomicon Ex Mortis. That'd be pretty cool. In a homage to previous Evil Dead films, Ellie is possessed in an elevator that restrains her by violently wrapping electrical wires around her arms, legs, and neck in a manner similar to how trees and branches restrained Cheryl, Bobby, and Joe and Mia from Evil Dead 2, and Evil Dead 2013, respectively, when they were possessed. Which, yeah. Beth saying, "Come get some," to the demon creature while holding a chainsaw is a homage to Ash Williams saying the same line while holding a shotgun in the S-Mart ending of Army of Darkness. The final film is the original Evil Dead trilogy. The Deadites make a few references to previous films in their dialogue. They say everyone will be dead by dawn, and Ellie tells Beth, "I'll swallow your soul." Director Lee Cronin confirmed online that the cat seen and heard in the vents of the apartment complex does in fact survive the events of the film. Thank good. Thank God. Thank fuck. Thank goodness. One of the lines being played on the record states that three volumes of the book exist. First volume, the original Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell. Second volume, the 2013 remake. And third volume, Evil Dead Rise. Thus, this makes the whole series canon. Alternatively, the three volumes could refer to the three books that Ash finds in the cemetery in Army of Darkness. The main three Deadites of the film all have different eye colors. Ellie has glowing silver eyes, Bridget has golden yellow, and Danny has pupil less white. Pupil less white. Whilst Ellie's eye color is unique to her Deadite, Bridget's is a reference to the 2013 remake and their Deadites, which all had yellow eyes, whilst Danny is a reference to the original Deadites who all had white eyes. The scene in the elevator where the blood starts to fill behind the lit buttons mirrors the scene in the original when the projector begins to fill with blood. I didn't even think of that. During the hallway attack, Ellie, Alyssa Sutherland, bites off the eye of one of the residents and spits it to the mouth of another. This action is very similar to a scene in Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn. In the beginning of the movie, Teresa reads the novel Wuthering Heights as Jessica lies on the bed before her. While Teresa continues to read the lines, Jessica hijacks in between and starts speaking aloud what Teresa read. She starts with a normal tone, which changes to demonic voice with the sentence, "Let me in." This is analogous to the first film, The Evil Dead 1981, by Sam Raimi, as how the first Deadeye was introduced. While Linda and Shelley play the game of spades, Cheryl intervenes in between and starts calling out the correct cards in order without looking at them. Before calling out the last card, her voice had already changed to demonic. The tree surgeon's truck is named Fonda's, possibly as a nod to Bridget Fonda, who appeared as Ash's girlfriend in the opening flashback scene in Army of Darkness. These are all like really cool references and stuff. In a 2023 interview with Hollywood News, Lee Cronin spoke about how being indoors because of the COVID pandemic influenced the writing of the film. I think it was on my mind the fact that I was writing a film about a family facing an evil force outside their door that they don't understand. And just like at that time was the first wave of COVID. You remember talking to friends like, I've read this or I've heard that, or anything was kind of possible at that point in time. So I do think that there was some sort of commonality between what me and the rest of the world was going through, and what I was writing, and what was happening in the script. I definitely found that I had time to look around my space more, and things like the cheese grater in the movie came from actually, I wasn't writing in my office or I wasn't writing in the library. I was around all these domestic items. So it kind of worked out. It was the right place to work on this story. Aside from the obvious tide of blood coming from the elevator, there are other references to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining 1980. At the beginning of the movie, there is a fast flight through the woods just like the one used in the original Evil Dead movies, and Sari to symbolize the movement of the demonic entities. In one moment, it flies over a lake, very similar to the beginning of The Shining. There is a fast flight through the woods just like the one used in the original Evil Dead movies, and Siri to symbolize the movement of the demonic entities. In one moment, it flies over a lake, very similar to the beginning of The Shining. Later, when Ellie, Alyssa Sutherland, is left outside the apartment, Beth, Lily Sullivan, is holding the entrance door, very similar to how Jack Nicholson does it when Shelley Duvall locks him up in the pantry. The same shot from bottom to top is used. Beth, as well as David, from the 2013 remake of Evil Dead, are the only protagonists to not lose a hand in the fight against evil. Huh? Oh, I never thought of that. I mainly thought of, that the one girl, Mia, kind of being the main protagonist. Well, at least in that. Unlike the previous films, which are all set in a cabin in the woods, this installment takes place in the city, with a protagonist other than Ashley Williams. The color the chainsaw used in the final act of the film is yellow, unlike the standard red-colored one in every Evil Dead film. And when Beth and Cassie fall from the elevator through the river of blood, Beth tries to wake up Cassie as Steve tried to wake up his daughter, Carol Ann, in the movie The Poltergeist 1982. Well, that is all the trivia that I have from the IMDb page. So, if you haven't seen Evil Dead Rise, or actually, if you haven't seen any of the Evil Dead movies, I highly suggest watching them all. I think most of them are on HBO Max and possibly Tubi and Shudder. So if you can, I mean, go check it out. And if you like them, let me know. You can shoot me an email at earlymorningcore@gmail.com or message me on Instagram, which is earlymorningcore. So I don't think I really mentioned that part either. I hope that you all enjoyed the episode, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Bye bye.